Okay, so I guess we can kick off with this workshop morning session. So please take it easy, relax, and enjoy the show. Let me share my screen. And of course, you have to sometimes interact, that you see everything, that you hear me loud and clear, because then I know that I don't lose you. Okay? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I hear yes, that means okay. All right, so let's kick off. So the agenda for today that I propose is the following. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you to my team. Since I already did the introduction of myself, that of course I can skip it. I'm going to introduce my colleague that helps me out with the daily work. Then I'm going to shed some light into how do we work. So we're going to go a little bit inside the kitchen and see what we are cooking over there. Then as the main gist of the presentation, we're going to focus on the repository of our marketplace towards Infor M3 customers. And I'm going to show a little bit of a pipeline, like the nearest future, a little bit distant future. And then at the end, I'm going to also demonstrate one of the apps that we've recently, we've released some time ago. I've also saved some time for questions and answers. So of course, all this is supposed to take around 40 minutes, hopefully. All right. So when it comes to introduction, I can skip myself, but in general, what I can say is that we're in Novacura, we are working in a team called Labs, and there we have 5 individuals, where 2 of them are, I would say, exclusively allocated towards Infor M3 products. And then on the top, you see Zoltan Bedu. He's been with Novacura for quite many years. Before that, he has been working as a software developer for IFS. And right now, I would say I consider Zoltan as some form of a court magician, which is really nice to have on board, especially when we develop complex applications. So he's, let's say, the technical guru of that duo. And on the other side of the table, it's me coming with, let's say, the business analysis solution, so to say, viewpoints, etc. So this is where the ideas come from, and Zoltan simply helps me out make those ideas simply using the Novacura Flow platform. One thing to mention about Zoltan is that before we started collaborating together, he has actually never heard of Infor M3 before. But as you know, it's like there are 2 parallel universes, so to say, IFS and M3. Sometimes people don't hear about each other at all, even if both systems are huge. So that actually pretty much shows also that it is actually regardless of the ERP system that you operate on, that you can use Novacura Flow for daily businesses, for creating, the ready-made apps like what we do. So Zoltan really quickly picked up the skill. And as you might know, what we are using actually as a connector towards M3, so the means of communication is purely APIs. So as long as I sort of say, come with a feedback to, or say, Zoltan, this is the API that we're going to use those input and we need this output, then it is actually the flow competence that matters. It's not the APIs any longer, as long as you're provided them. Then let's focus a bit on our mission. So we have a bunch of points that we sort of cover on a daily basis. And first of all, it is the modules that we are currently supporting with our ready-made apps, and those that we are going to focus in the future. And of course, most of you probably realize that when you think about the implementation project, right, Infor M3 implementation project, typically what you would use extension like in that, what Novacura Flow in that sort of relation typically is the module that is pretty much related to warehouse management and logistics, right? That's always been like this. It's probably going to be like this. So when you look at, let's say, those official names of M3 module from the cloud version, at least that's probably supply chain execution. But the idea, of course, that we sort of like step a little bit further and go and sort of like go inside those other modules where you would typically have another products, for instance, from Infor, right? So when you send, let's say, have, let's say an ordinary customer and they are actually working with different type of modules where they need, let's say, mobility support, you would typically, if for instance that would be Infor, ask for many, many different products, typically also written in different technologies. And that's exactly what we want to avoid and focus at the same time, that we want to build all the apps just in the Novacura Flow platform, right? So besides the warehouse management logistics, which is understood as supply chain execution, we would also probably going to attack sales management, so everything related to customer order management, registering batch orders, like in the boutiques and depots, things like these, to manufacturing execution, where you can look at a material plan, reporting of the production, reporting of the materials, the standard things. We're going to definitely look into the procurement area, where first you will be able to register the claims to the supplier, to the suppliers. We also going to focus on the planning apps in certain point of time. And then eventually we're going to focus on the common module, which is service rental maintenance. I highlighted only those two, which I sort of clear where our, let's say, path goes. But of course, I will never say never to finance, of course, right? But that probably will come at some stage later in time. But in general, the main message of what I'm showing you right now here is that we would really want to take care of mostly all of the modules available in M3. Then, of course, we also have to make sure that we are up to date. And as you know, especially the cloud version, it's so to say, updated nearly every month. And we should simply stay ahead of those updates, especially the critical ones, especially when it comes to the changes of the APIs, as well as the new features are coming in. As you know, it's rather easy to follow it up. Infor has to do it quite well to document it. And now you can also do it via the Cloud Suite to check it out, what's coming up in the following months, so that we also sort of are aware. And then at the same time, besides the typical M3 features, we also are focusing on what's the latest, what are the latest market trends and the technologies. And as you know, Novacura Flow as a platform tries to harness the power of, let's say, the technologies that are popping up. There's a lot of talk about ChatGPT. There have been already for a while artificial intelligence. As an example, for instance, of an app which we thought maybe introducing as standard is first using AI in form of a form recognizer. And what it does is that simply you can take a picture of a document, not the barcode, but the document itself, and you can sort of transfer all the content inside the flow, right? So imagine now, for instance, you have, let's say, 5-10 different suppliers. They are using always the same delivery note. And you can, say, map those delivery note templates, and you simply take a picture of entire document and fetch all the content inside it. So, the item numbers, quantities, I don't know, for instance, if you're using the invoice, maybe also the prices. And the only thing you need to do is just to see that everything is sort of transferred and if it really corresponds to what's inside the truck. So that type of examples of that you don't really need to wait until AI is utilized heavily in 20 years. We literally can do it nowadays, now. Then when it comes to the contacts to the Infor M3 partners and the customers, it is actually to you guys that those all ideas that we use for our ready-made apps, all those things actually come from. It's the inspiration, the experience that I have through projects that I had a chance to participate in. All those different inputs literally ended up on one table, and this is where we try to sort of say put them together and create the apps that we can later put on the marketplace. And then again, since we are responsible for delivering those apps, you should be also responsible for helping out in situations something goes wrong, something behaves erroneous. Therefore, we take a full account of that. Anytime something happens and the apps are downloaded, we should always serve a helping hand if such is needed. And then eventually at the end, we should always, and we are trying to be present and bring awareness to potentially new customers, to the present customers at all major M3 related events. As some of you might recognize, this is the screenshot from the M3 User Association meeting, Working Together conference that took part in May this year. And a group of our experts, including myself, Lars, and as you can see also Axel here, we've been there and trying to answering questions from customers. Now I would like to shed some light into the way we work. So it's important also to know that, as I mentioned before, first once we collect those all different inputs from many different areas, everything always starts with an idea. And I try to obviously put this idea on a digital paper, and that's what I do. So every time when me and Zoltan are working on an app, pretty much everything starts like what you see in front of you. That is the concept, as I call it, of the potential apps. Those of you that are much more into Novacura Flow, you might recognize that this concept is built on of something which we consider as user steps. So in general speaking, the concept is pretty much shown from the end user perspective. And all those red, I'll say links, arrows, It simply shows like different interactions with different screens that users would typically interact with. So that is something that I present to Zoltan. I present to him an idea, say, hey, listen, this is what we are aiming to obtain. These are different features, which I would wish that this and that app is going to cover, and we're going to focus on it. So, and inside this graph is, of course, there are also descriptions about like how certain, for instance, screens behaves. What type of different, like fields and statistic fields you have there. And then also information about the APIs, right? Since I'm the one that knows that from M3 side, therefore it's important that I transfer it very clearly to Zoltan. I said, this is the API you're going to use it, the input, and that's the output that we need to get out of it. And then all the rest is, of course, the flow competence that Zoltan clearly has. And of course, once the concept is understood, then the main part comes, that is the design. And of course, that is done in the Flow Studio, where Zoltan is developing it. And then somewhere at the end of our development phase, I come in again and I first perform the full-scale testing of every single bit of this application. And I think at this point, it's also important to mention that the apps that we create, generally speaking, supposed to be run the way they are, regardless what type of industry an M3 customer is running. So the apps, for instance, let's imagine we have a pick delivery app, could be used same by, for instance, a customer that are running food and beverage industry. For instance, where the scanning of the catch weight is, I think, that of an everyday business. While the other, for instance, distribution company where everything is labeled with, let's say, SSCC numbers, you just need to scan to fetch a certain data just to push it and trigger the transaction. So each of those industries are completely different. They work and pick products in a completely different way, that they all can use the same app, and it can just be either customized and configured. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it later on. Once the app is done, then we simply release it. And the release is simply done on the marketplace, as you know, and then there's a full documentation done also on our website, docs.novacura.com. And there, the explanation about what this app consists of, how it's configured, is written in a typical M3 language. So, and the reason why it's done this way is that because that's typically the drivers of the project, like solution owners, consultants, business analysts, pretty much people that are into M3 from the functional side. And that's the documentation that's mainly addressed to. Once the app is released, we simply add it to a place which, as you know, we call the marketplace. And there, under the category of M3, you find pretty much all the apps that we currently have. If you simply go inside marketplace right now and you type in M3, right now, this is what you would get, probably around 24 records, if I count well. And as you can see here in the header, it's written down first and second generation for M3 apps, and I would like to explain a little bit what is that. So when I joined Novacura already has acquired certain apps that's been developed by colleagues of mine back in the days. And right now, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to sort of say, redo them again. We test them, we look inside them, and then we try to sort of like rewrite them in a completely different way, including especially the Cloud Suite environment of M3. And by doing so, this sort of like replacement phase is still going on. We are simply phasing out the first generation with the second generation app. So ultimately, at the end, we're supposed to have only the apps that are compatible with the cloud and the latest on-prem version that is 13.4. On the right-hand side, there's an explanation of a typical app, for instance, Big Delivery, where you have a short description what each and every app does on a rather high level. Then you have a bunch of screenshots. And then of course, you can also have a link over here, which gets you to, let's say, the main app bundle, right? Which at the end will be able to be downloaded. So if you become simply a subscribent, you would simply download entire package of all the apps that are available. How does it look in practice? Pretty much, you download to the marketplace, becomes a subscribent. You find the apps that you're interested in. Then you type in the categories I mentioned before. Let's say the typical one would be M3. You find a typical application that you're interested in. Here in this particular example, let's say quick inventory, MS3 10, and then you download it, download the file, upload it to the studio, and this is how it works in practice. So one of the main, I would say, pros for having the ready-made apps is that you don't really need to start from scratch. Imagine that you have like a typical implementation project. And of course, it's never 100% that everything what is in standard, you're going to run in standard. There are some, of course, exceptions to the main and typical things that this particular company does. But in essence, in general, if it's like 75, 80% of the cases that the company runs the standard, this is a very good way to sort of like jumpstart the project, because there you have apps which are tested, which are compatible with possibly every industry that is run in M3. And you're able simply to run them the way they are directly. And of course, if something pops up, something that is typical for the company, you as a owner of the IP, that is the intellectual property, you can always go inside and simply draw, add new stuff, delete stuff, change stuff like APIs, pretty much whatever you wish. So that's like an ownership that you become of, and you're fully it's fully yours, so you can always do whatever type of changes you wish. On top of that, on top of customization, because that requires some form of skills in the flow, we've also introduced something which we consider as the environment properties. And these should be typically understood as a possibility to adjust and configure the app according to a certain needs. So think about it as if you buy a car, and then things like side mirrors, seat, steering wheel, all this is very personal, right? And it's hard for us that produces a standard to define how those things should really be. Therefore, we introduced that every single app has a properties, and these properties, like here on the right-hand side, are also very well documented in an M3, basic M3 language. So again, this is also addressed towards people that are running the project from the functional perspective. Right, so that the application can be really configured the way it's supposed to be. And again, I mentioned, for instance, a distribution company that are using, for instance, SSTC numbers, very fully automated, just with scanners, possibly no manual input. And then on the other hand, for instance, you have food and beverage. For instance, when they're working with catch weight, you have like consumer packages, and you need to simply scan different things, rather manual work to do, because that's how the business is. Each and every the flows can be configured in a completely different way, even if it's the same app, just by using those properties. And as I mentioned, they are written down in a very typical M3 language. However, some of you might also recognize what each and every property can do. So for example, if you're working, this is an example of a pack delivery app, which allows you to use the simple packing and advanced packing of a delivery, if that's recognized. And there, for instance, when you're using the advanced packing, you know that what's required in order to pack the picking list line is, for instance, the packaging type. So if you know that this is always the constant value, you can always map it up, so you don't have to worry about it. The same goes for the printer. So after everything is packed, you can also trigger the printing option. And there you can, for instance, define per user, because those those properties are on either app or user level. You can also define that. So for instance, a bunch of users have specific mobile printers that are connected to the truck. So you can actually define these too, so you don't have to worry about it. And on top of that, you can also automate, or as we call it, also bypass the screens. So then again, have in mind, for instance, this typical distribution company where you have hard allocated picking list lines. And then pretty much whatever it's on a picking list, it's supposed to be delivered the way they are. You don't interact with any quantities. You just pick pallets and you deliver to the bay. So of course, certain reporting screens, like reporting location, reporting quantities, containers, all these can be fully automated. So technically, it can work like this, that as soon as they scan a pallet, everything is reported. You come back to the picking list, which is updated. So one line less to do. I'm going to demonstrate it also using my example, so you're going to see. So that's about the configuration. And then, as I mentioned before, everything is then well documented on the marketplace documentation, where you find everything related to the screenshots, installation, as well as the configuration parameters. And then shortly a bit about the pipeline, this design pipeline. this is what I mentioned before, that right now the full focus is on the warehouse management and logistics, so the supply chain execution module. And this is where we are currently. From the, I would say, the count perspective, it does not look, let's say, very much, but of course, not every single app equals, from the size perspective, equals each other. Meaning, first, if you have a pick delivery where we spent literally 2 sprints, where we cover, the catch weights, all type of different industries, all type of item variants, it's way much more work to do than, for instance, when you have a stocking from where you simply just scan, the balance identity, you just get information about its location, all the, details about particle balance identity. So it's completely different size of application. So I would say from the percentage perspective, we are around 80% done with the main warehouse management module. And then, of course, later on, we're going to continue, so to say, investigating into the procurement, manufacturing, sales, etc. The sequence of these apps are also not like nailed in stone, so we can always change that, depending, of course, what are the requests. But right now, we are sort of like following certain changes, certain requests that have been already, so to say, addressed to us before we started the journey. And then this is also something that it's worth to mention. Maybe that's had been mentioned yesterday already by one of our experts. We've became a member of a user voice platform that is simply a possibility that you can key in / check the ideas that would be good to have in Novacura Flow. And it's not about the marketplace, as you can see the categories, but it's also about the product, the platform as such. There is a marketplace category which clearly defines that, okay, you can also type in simply an idea for ready-made apps, what type of things it would be nice to have in the current status of the apps and those that are coming in the future. So from that point, I would gladly encourage all of you to, of course, type the ideas you think that would be nice to have in a standard. It's, after all, the input comes from the market, it comes from you guys, so I would very much highly appreciate for it. Here's an example of an idea where, for instance, our first app that we released, that is the receiving of the purchase orders, could also have incorporated the receipt of the ASN, that is advanced shipping notes. So if you're familiar with PPS 360 program, that is another way of receiving the POs where you have EDI connected suppliers. There are a bunch of customers that are working this way, but it's very fully automated as long as the EDI is connected, or simply the new cloud feature that is the internal sales orders, that use the same functionality. So here, an example of an idea, how that could be typed in. And then using the same platform, we are also able to share the roadmap. So in my example, for instance, I'm trying to be, so to say, half a year ahead. So each and every one that logs into user voice, ideas.novacura.com, then you're able to check what's going to happen, what's currently done, what's currently been developed. So right now, as you can see, we're in the final phase of testing of a stock move app. And then we're going to focus on another one, which are already in the pipeline. So those type of things are fully crystal clear, and I'm fully transparent with them. So please have a look at it, read it, what's coming up, and keep fingers crossed. Okay, so right now it's time for a demo. So I'm going to show you a bit of a real life example of one of the apps that we've released some time ago. Please still confirm with the voice that you hear what I'm saying.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, very good. Okay. Very good then. All right, so I'm going to show you the pick delivery app. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you in 2 ways. First of all, it's fully manual. And then I'm going to use the configuration parameters. And there I'm going to configure it that it's rather fully automatic. Okay. So here on the right-hand side, you're supposed to see the screen of my mobile phone. And there I'm running the mobile client of a Novacura Flow. And on the left-hand side, you see the M3 cloud version. And I'm inside one of the picking lists. As you can see, there are 5 different lines. And these are hard allocated lines with containers. And the idea is pretty much that we go through every step, every user step that is, so to say, applicable for that delivery. So we can start. So I simply go inside outbound menu. Again, outbound menu is just the example of how many can be called. We have a pick delivery application, and then we are fetching information of the user. First of all, there's always a possibility to choose this search mode. And again, each and every screen can be fully automated, fully default. Now I'm showing a fully manual option. The difference between those two is that when you use the bulk, you're using the high-level searching criteria. If you wish to find, let's say, a particular delivery, or show me, let's say, deliveries from a certain customer or within a certain time span, etc. So that's why it's called bulk. On the other hand, when you have detail, you're focusing directly on scanning a product, right? And if the product is recognized, it directly recognizes the delivery, the picking list line. So that's, again, another way of like picking. But eventually, at the end, all different search modes meet at a certain point, and then the report looks exactly the same. So I'm going to use actually bulk for this particular example. There we have a bunch of input fields that you can use. Again, you can automate them. I'm going to use simply a delivery. Since we know it's here, it's a suffix 1 of delivery 27 at the end. Why not simply using delivery option? So I'm going to type in. And as you can see, we have 10 lines. And the reason being there are 10 lines is that because there are 2 suffixes of the same delivery. So that's the suffix number 1. We also have suffix number 2. Typically, the yellow color means that there has been already something picked in that delivery. The reason probably why it's yellow is that because I deleted a certain line just before we started this demo. But in essence, it should supposed to indicate to a user that, aha, someone is inside, someone is doing something. So in general, work in progress. Right. I click on this one, and I simply go next. And as you can see here, you have the table view shown in a tile mode, as I call it. It's, of course, customized towards the mobile client, so it's rather condensed. But in order to make it slightly more visible, I would switch it to the grid mode instead, and there, so that you can see that the containers that we have in the list are exactly those that I have in M3. So the idea behind is that I'm going to now use the barcode scanning. As you can see on top of it, there is something called the multi-data field. And that field that pretty much is equipped with the translation engine. And what it does is that it fetches simply the barcoded information in the string. And you can pretty much use and scan any type of barcode types. The one that I typically use for my example is using the GS1 128 technology, which could be 2-dimensional or simply, simply as a QR code or data matrix. I have in front of me just a typical code 128, a standard barcode. So I'm going to use the picture mode for that. Otherwise, if I would have a typical scanner, I would simply use the scanner. And the idea behind it is that if I would scan a typical, very unique information that is available on that screen, as you can see, that is actually the container that is very unique for every single line. What is going to happen is that we will fetch the record from the grid, and we'll automatically press next to continue to the report screen. So actually so if I'm going to switch these over here, as you can see, I have a bunch of barcodes on top of me. So I'm going to just hover over it. And as you can see directly, we jump to the report quantity screen. Since it is a hard located picking list line, all the information here is already filled in. You don't need to worry about it. And that's example, if you remember the example where in such situations, do I need to really go inside there if I'm not intending to change anything? Probably not. But then again, you still can do a lot of different things. I could talk hours about this app. For example, if you press list, you can see all available containers for that specific item that could be picked from location era 0101, as you can see. So technically what I could also do is that, for instance, deallocate that particular container and allocate something else. Allocate 2 more if I want to, right? So of course, in that particular example, it doesn't make sense, right, to do it this way, for instance. But imagine that, for instance, you're working in a food and beverage, and you're working with a bulk products, right? And you'd wish to clean entire bulk, let's say, container, and it has a little bit extra inside. So of course, typically in such situation, you would say, okay, yeah, customer would take extra, 15 or 20 kilos. So that allows you, for instance, to also over allocate certain things. So all those options are available in our app. So right now, let's just leave it the way it is. And as you can see here, we have also search balance identity. So typically here, if I would have, let's say, a soft allocated line, and let's say I have a quantity of 50, I could literally scan 5 different things right away, and they would be simply marked like these by scanning. And then by pressing next, I'll come back to the main screen showing all those 5 different containers allocated to one picking list line. So that also shows one thing, that for instance, if you have a soft allocated line, you can actually work. You don't have to rerun the entire process, so to say, 5 times that you report 10 pieces and then you get 40 and then you have to go to the same line. You literally can do all those 5 steps at once by simply choosing them right away instead of like doing repetitive action for 5 times.
Adam, sorry for interrupting. We technically only have 5 minutes. We started a bit later, and I guess we can add a few more minutes, but maybe for some questions, so try to,
absolutely, yeah. Thank you,
right?
Thank you for reminding that. Yes, I lost the sense of time, but let's just continue. Here I have package print, so this allows you also to print the package and pack it. First of all, that's the delivery assigned with the package. So you can actually also do that. You can choose the different package type. And then you can leave also the package number empty. So you can, in that situation, can let the M3 create the package type for you. And as you can see, the package is created. And then you also can report it to a dock location. And then the printing option, where again, you can choose the printer, the labels, we can skip that. So we just report the printing. So as you can see right now, the line disappeared. I'm gonna refresh M3. And then we have one line that is on dock. It's already packed and it disappears so the user can. So since we are short of time, then I guess it would be probably enough just to show you this one. And I hope you believe me with fully automation of the screens, that it works very well. So probably we can now switch to the questions or to the final slide, which I have, which is the summary slide. That is why we have the apps. And that is mainly because of the jump starter package. So you don't need to start from scratch. You have the fully configurable apps that you can simply use them the way they are, and you can tweak them to make them more automatic, more responsive, more adapted to your process requirements. And there, of course, they are using the customization option. So simply you go inside the Novacura Flow platform and you simply adjust them the way they are. And then what's most important is that all the modules that that I showed you that we are currently working on and those that we're planning to do, we are gonna keep it in one technology, one platform, so you keep all the eggs in one basket. With that being said, I would wish to thank you for listening to me.